Welcome to Connection. I'm your host, Tim Burns. Today we're going to talk about entrepreneurship in Oakland County, and I'm pleased to be joined by a special guest, Ren Carlton, who's in charge of DAS Professional Services.
Hi, Tim. Glad to be on the show. I love coming out to these type of things and talking entrepreneurship because, as you know, I've been doing it for a long time. So, yeah, happy to talk about it and kind of spread the word of the message of entrepreneurship and how it works and how anybody can do it.
Right. Well, 13 years ago, you were a man with a cell phone and a dream, and now you're in charge of a nice company that's making some good profits, and you're living the American dream. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got there?
Absolutely. So, I'll take a step back. I graduated from Oakland University in '97. I basically kind of was looking for my own path there, and I went to a CPA firm. Actually, I worked at 3 different CPA firms in the course of 2.5 years. Didn't really resonate with me. I got my license, but it was a challenge in terms of really staying plugged in as an employee.
Okay.
So at the time, the job market was pretty incredible. So I actually was able to leverage that into a CFO position for a small manufacturer in Troy. And what I came to discover as I was going along and doing my thing is that the owner was actually doing stuff, and he had a boat, he had a plane, he was living this lifestyle, and quite frankly, I didn't think he was smarter than I was. So I was figuring out, well, who's this dumb one? I'm working for him. I was kind of bored with what I was doing, and I was like, oh, why don't you take the plunge? So one day I just kind of woke up, did all the things you're not supposed to do, and started my business, no business plan, barely a network, and just kind of went out there, started my basement with a little more than a cell phone, a laptop, and just mixed it up and tried to figure it out.
Well, now what is DAS Professional Services?
So Dynamic Advisory Solutions, or DAS, what we do is CFO support services. So we do training, staffing, and outsourcing in the CFO space. So we're a very specific niche that we've grown over the years.
Okay. And you're based in what city?
We're based in Troy. We're right by Somerset Mall, and we love the location. And yeah, we've been there. We've been in Troy since inception, and we love being a Troy business, and it's been great for us. And yeah, we're local, and we do a lot of business here and outside of the region.
Okay. And let's get back to then, you're sitting in your basement with the cell phone and the laptop. How did you get to where you are now?
Oh, it's been a long time, but I'll tell you this, a lot of luck, I would say, and a lot of hard work, and a lot of things aligning. And the help of other people would be a big contributing factor, I would argue, because a month into it, I got a great introduction from a good friend of mine, Kevin Lambrix, who's now gone on to bigger and better things.
Okay.
But he made an introduction to my first client, and ended up turning into a decent-sized client. Okay. And I thought, wow, this is easy. 30 days into it, I got this great client making great money, not working that many hours. And then something bad happened. I lost the client. And I was like, well, now what do I do? And Kevin's like, well, I don't have that many introductions for you. You got to figure it out. So just building a book of network and getting out there and learning how to call and going to the Chamber of Commerce's and just really learning and just growing. Hard work, I would argue, is the biggest contributing factor to any entrepreneur out there. You don't have to be the smartest, you don't have to be the quickest, but there's no substitute for hard work.
Now, say you're disgruntled in your job, you just hate going into work every day, and you really feel like you want to be your own boss, or maybe, unfortunately, with the economy the way it is, you don't even have a job anymore. You were hit with that layoff. What should you be thinking about if you want to get out there and be an entrepreneur?
You bring up a good point, because I think a lot of people think I'm in between stuff. I'm going to be a consultant, or I'm going to be an entrepreneur, I'm going to grow this business, or I'm going to buy a franchise. And I would argue that's a real dangerous route to go, because the successful entrepreneurs and successful employees are 2 different personalities. To be an entrepreneur, it's a risk tolerance, it's a passion, it's a desire. There's a saying that once I got into business for myself, I started working half days. Whatever I did with the other 12 hours was entirely up to me. And there's a lot of truth to that. It's a grind, and there's a lot of hours, but it's a labor of love if you're an entrepreneur. But it's a sentence for just torture if you don't like it, you don't have a passion for it, because it takes a lot of energy and drive. That being said, if you have something that you want to try and tinker with, I highly recommend it. And I recommend people to start small, because I did tinker before I took the plunge. I started doing stuff. I set up a legal entity. I started doing some seminars and started figuring out, okay, what can I do? And it's nowhere near what we do today. But at the end of the day, if you are going to go down that path, make sure, number one, that it's something you want. It's not just being forced into entrepreneurship, because I just don't think that's a formula for success. But in number two, just realizing that it's going to take work, and the myth that entrepreneurs don't work very hard is farthest from the truth. So, I mean, I'm in a bunch of entrepreneurial organizations, and the ones that are successful grind it out, at least in the beginning.
Right. And you talk about risk tolerance a little bit. Some people may not have a lot of capital to start off. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think you need capital. I mean, if you have one of two things, if you have time or you have money, and what you'll find is the more successful your business becomes, you have less time and more money, and there's an offset, and you have to figure out when do you buy someone to work for you, or hire an employee, or buy a contractor, or buy a service, or buy an outsourced solution. I mean, it just comes into a function of time and energy, and that's a tough thing to do when we talk about risk tolerance. So when I got into I was in my basement, I figured out I didn't want to be an admin my whole life. If I do my business by myself and it's just me, I'm going to have to do all this administrative stuff. And I started growing. I had little piles all over my desk, and it was horrible. All over the basement floor, and I was like, this is not going to work. I mean, this is just not my personality.
Yeah.
So I figured I got to hire someone. Well, I hire someone. Now I'm not making any money. I don't want to bring them to my house, so I'm going to rent an office space. Got a great office space. It's costing me money. I'm getting lines of credit now. And it's scary. It's daunting. And it's a similar situation now that we're going to take that next step to go stage 2, stage 3 business, paying infrastructure, taking on some more risk, and you just have to have tolerance for it. And I mean, in my mind, the stress associated with that is far less than reporting to someone in an employee relationship. So I'm very wired for entrepreneurship. I think people, if they gut check it, if they think they are, it's a wonderful life.
Yeah. And then talking a little about risk and putting money into a business versus time. What are your thoughts on franchise versus starting your own idea?
Well, ironically enough, we started a franchise that didn't do so well. We're going to do our second launch of it next year. But I mean, at the end of the day, franchise conceptually makes sense for the right type of business. I mean, if you have a business that's fully established, if you're buying something that's well-established brand name, good processes, almost a sure bet, and you have the money to do it, fantastic. In my mind, if you don't have all those things, or you don't have the money to buy a significant brand and you're almost guaranteed success, I think try to figure it out for yourself. I mean, franchises is based on someone scratching out a notepad in their basement or on their kitchen table and taking a risk at it. And the way I would determine it, and the way I've advised clients, is that you figure out, okay, you got to spend X amount to buy a franchise. If you had those funds, you hired consultants, did it yourself, how much would it cost you in terms of time and energy? And again, it goes into the time-money thing. If you got a lot of time on your hands and not that much money, it might make sense to try to figure it out for yourself.
Right. What are some of the most common pitfalls you see small businesses facing right now?
When you talk about small, I would define that like startup-ish. Let's talk about those type of businesses. Say majority of businesses are small businesses. Let's focus on that. It's not really our core client, but I can tell you just from being around them, the success factors. The biggest thing I would argue, and it's the same thing I tell my sales staff, is you have to engage. You can't typically run a business, even in the online business, you have to engage online. You have to engage in people. You have to be out there. You have to be talking. You have to be mixing it up. I mean, just being in front of people, by osmosis, things will start happening. You can't do a business by analysis. You can't sit. You can do all the spreadsheets in the world, and I'm a finance guy. I mean, you can do all the spreadsheets and what-if analysis and risk, but at the end of the day, you got to see if people want what you're selling. You got to see if people like it, because if you don't do that, you have the greatest widget in the world, but if you can't, no one knows about it, you're never going to sell it.
Right. Now, but you talk about analysis. How important is it to have a good business plan, though, before you jump into things?
Well, I didn't. It worked out pretty well. I mean, knock on wood, but I do now, and that's I did go reverse engineer it. I did go fix those things down the road, and it would probably make things easier. But at the end of the day, it gets down to hard work, and you have to have an idea, a framework. Absolutely. And I'm a dork. I devour business books, and I love it. So a lot of his stuff's ingrained at this point. But at the end of the day, business plan's great. But the thing people don't do is engage. I mean, if you've got an idea, talk to people. I mean, there's this myth that people think they've got this great business idea. They're not going to tell anybody because everyone's going to steal it, and it's fantastic. I'm going to keep it like this. Guess what? Dozens of people, if not hundreds, if not thousands of people have already thought of it. They just don't have the energy, drive, or determination to do it.
Right.
So if you don't talk to people and figure that out, you're never going anywhere.
Right. So how is your business thriving in this economy?
Thriving is a strong word. We're doing well. I mean, I always like to do bigger, faster, quicker, more profitable. I mean, but we're doing really well. I mean, we're pretty much on track to do our projections. I mean, like I talked about earlier, we're in the infrastructure building stage. So we're building processes, we're investing in technology, we're getting a bigger office space. And it's that gap, that scary space that, okay, once I do this, I'm going to get to one step forward to hopefully take 2, 3, 5 steps, or one step back to go 2, 3, 5 steps forward. But again, you never know. So are we on track? Absolutely, we're ahead of where we should be today.
Okay.
But to answer your question, good. And there's a lot of business out there that are doing fantastic right now, especially with the automotive rebound, so to speak.
Right.
I mean, you see that cascade effect.
So do you see things picking up here in Oakland County?
I do. I mean, I really see, I mean, there's a lot more. I mean, the thing that people have to overcome in terms of the business world for it to really trickle down to the employee level is the confidence. And that's where you see people on the sidelines. There's confidence at the business owner level that some people are freaked out. They don't want to buy, they don't want to invest, they don't know when the next downturn's coming, so they're a lot more cautious. They're not rolling the dice, they're not much as gunslingers. The other thing's the banks. I mean, it's tough to get loans out there today, even for good credits. I mean, the banks are loosening up now, but those two things in combination is really bad for a lot of the potential employees out there. But you see that loosening. You see people realizing, I can only hire contractors for so long. This is costing me twice as much. This is getting ridiculous. I got to bring someone in. So I definitely see a recovery continuing to go as it is now.
Okay. So what do you think are some of the elements that local businesses need to put in place to make sure they're being successful?
I think you have to be cautious in spending. You definitely have to look at the financials. You definitely have to do some sort of projection type thing. But you got to take risk. I mean, there's no way around it. Entrepreneurs take risk. Successful entrepreneurs take risk. You can minimize it. You can do what you got to do there. But at the end of the day, you have to invest and try to take the risk out as much as possible. Do a plan. Have a contingency plan. Figuring out what is your threshold. And trying stuff and engaging. But again, the biggest thing is engaging, being out there talking to people, seeing what the market wants, what it needs. I mean, we move, pivot, redirect, go all the time because we're trying to respond to the market. 3 years ago, everyone loved outsourcing. I mean, they just wanted pure take it. I don't want to deal with it anymore. Today, people don't want outsource. They want self-sufficiency. They want to learn how to do it themselves. So pivot, adjust, go. And if you don't talk to people and you don't engage, you're not going to figure that out. And that's not what people are going to want 3 years from now. I mean, they're going to want something entirely different.
So, Ren, I've heard one of the best things you can have in your arsenal of sales tools is having a good elevator pitch. Can you tell us a little bit about what an elevator pitch is and how you can have a great one?
Absolutely. I mean, it's one of the most important things because people in their heads have an idea what their business is and what they think people hear, but at the end of the day, they don't. It's not really easily translatable to people that are listening. So, for example, I describe my business as CFO support services. That's training, staffing, and outsourcing. Very simple, very succinct, and very precise. We've had laundry lists of target mission statements, value props, elevator pitches, and we're talking to other accountants, other financial people, which didn't make a whole lot of sense. So we had it done professionally, had someone that understood that this is what your audience wants to hear. This is the obstacles you want to challenge. You don't want to be contentious against the CPA firms because that's not what you do. So specific language is really important. So I highly recommend if you don't have the gift of gab and talk to someone that does because it's a very powerful tool.
Okay. And exactly, can you just spell out briefly what an elevator pitch actually is?
It's just a brief description of what your business is. It just describes what you do in 30 seconds or less. And the idea is if you're ever stuck in an elevator with someone and you're going up 3 or 4 floors, someone said, what do? You could get it all out and they would understand with perfect clarity.
Ren, thanks for that great advice. Appreciate having you on the show today.
Thank you for having me. I had a lot of fun.
I'm Tim Burns. You're watching Oakland Connection, and we'll see you back here after a brief message.
Do you know that stroke targets by color? Odds are, if you're African American, you're twice as likely to suffer a stroke as white Americans. Know where you stand, because beating the odds isn't about winning, it's about living. Join the power to end stroke at strokeassociation.org.
Hi, I'm Tim Burns, and you're watching Oakland Connection. You know, it seems whenever I go around Oakland County, someone tells me they have worked, gone to school, or lived at some time in their life in the city of Clawson. So I'm pleased today to have Jennifer True talking to us today about a special event to help the Clawson High School Band. Thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
Tell us about the Keeping It in the C-Town All Alumni Reunion.
Well, this is an opportunity for many of the folks, whether they've been to Clawson in the last couple of months, couple of years, maybe they were all at one point in time still live in Clawson, but this is a good opportunity for us to raise money for the performing arts boosters.
Okay.
And the event's going to be at the Knights of Columbus on Saturday, October 13th, and we're encouraging anybody that's somehow associated with Clawson to come out.
Okay, and we have a flyer here. And what I find is interesting is we have two pictures on the flyer, one from 1992 and one from 2012 with the band. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, actually, believe it or not, the last time that the uniforms were purchased was back in 1989.
Okay.
And when I heard about that, I'm probably, like most of your viewers, were a little bit shocked that the uniforms are still being used. And I guess they don't make, I mean, as for the uniforms themselves, they've held up for a long time. And, at this point in time, as for the uniforms, they're about $230 a piece. They don't come very cheap. So.
Right.
What we're doing is trying to raise over $20,000 for the night to help raise and replace those uniforms.
Okay, and so tell us a little bit about what's going to be going on at the Keeping It in the C-Town event here.
Well, it's going to start at 9 p.m. at the Knights of Columbus, and for a $10 donation, you'll be able to enter the Knights of Columbus Hall, enjoy some music, enjoy the silent, actually be able to participate in the silent auction that we're going to have. Okay. And also we're going to have a nice little small Clawson merchandise booth over there as well. So you can want to buy some Clawson alumni gear, you'll be able to purchase it as well. And we're going to have a cash bar, lots of music, lots of memories, lots of fun. So.
All right, great. Yeah. And again, that's on Saturday, October 13th. And how much is it at the door to get in?
$10 donation.
Okay. And for those people who don't know where the Knights of Columbus Hall is, it's between 14 and 15 Mile Road on Main Street?
That is correct, at 870 North Main Street.
And if people want to make donations, maybe because they can't attend or they might want to give more than the donation at the door, can they do that? And is there a name of a charitable organization, or how does that work out?
Absolutely. We're certainly looking for donations, whether it be a monetary donation, whether it be for services, an actual item. Would love any sort of donations. Okay. So if they are interested, they can certainly call phone number. Actually, there's two different phone numbers. There's 248-376-2293 or 248-891-5822. We also have an email as well, if that's something easy for folks to connect with us. That email address is clawsonhsreunion@gmail.com. So, and one more spot, actually, we are on Facebook. We do have a page, so if you type up Keeping It in C-Town, you'll be able to find our event, and please attend. We're looking forward to it.
And, how did you first come about deciding to do the support for the band in regards to this as well?
Well, actually, last year there was a similar event that occurred at the Knights of Columbus with a class of 1991, and they're also getting donations, trying to raise money for the Clawson Public Schools with the boosters, and also for the performing arts. So it was actually, this year, as people had approached, talked about having a similar event, that's how I got involved. I really like the Clawson community. The idea of helping each other out, and there's a lot of people, in the background that feel the same way. So. Well,
thank you for volunteering your time to do this as well. It really helps make it a better community for all of us there. So if you're going to be in Clawson area on October 13th, stop by, and if you're a former alumni or maybe you have friends or family that have gone to Clawson schools, stop by for a great time to help a great cause. Let's get some new uniforms for the kids so we can take pride in the Clawson Marching Band. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
You're watching Oakland Connection, and we'll be right back.
If a natural disaster happened, we'd probably all meet around the grocery store.
We would all meet at a bus stop.
Oh, we'd probably meet at our neighbor's house.
Welcome back to Oakland Connection. I'm Tim Burns. I'm joined by Oakland County Treasurer Andy Meisner. Thanks for joining us, Andy.
Well, thank you, Tim. It's a pleasure to be here.
Right. You know, one of the things that's impressed me about your term as the treasurer is that you aren't just a bean counter. You've actually been pretty proactive in getting out in the community and doing some things to protect the taxpayers. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've been up to recently?
Sure. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that, Tim, and appreciate your leadership in the community. Well, you know, in terms of getting out there, I've been on a treasurer tour throughout all of the 63 communities throughout Oakland County, meeting with some of the local elected officials and talking about ways that we can cut costs and you know, streamline and find some efficiencies. And so I've been doing that. But one of the things I've been working a lot on is, as we've talked a little bit about, you know, I was the first in the country to sue Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac on behalf of the Oakland County taxpayers.
Exactly.
And, you know, the backstory is that, you know, in Michigan we have something called a real estate transfer tax.
Right.
And, you know, your people in the viewing audience, you know, when they sell a home, they have to pay a real estate transfer tax.
Right.
And it ends up being $1.10 per $1,000 goes to the county.
Okay.
$7.50 per $1,000 goes to the state. And there's an exemption in the law that says if you're a government entity, you don't have to pay.
Okay.
So for the last 20 plus years, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have been saying, hey, we're a government entity, we don't have to pay this real estate transfer tax. Well, I got brought together a legal team, and we did some brainstorming, and we were trying to figure out some ways that we could recover some of the property values that have been lost in Oakland County and try to get some of our money back.
Okay.
And we came up with a legal theory that for the purposes of this law, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are actually private companies.
Okay.
And the evidence is pretty strong to support it. You know, number one, they pay their CEOs $5 million.
Okay.
You've served in public office, and I don't think that there's many government salaries that are $5 million or anywhere near close
exactly.
to that.
Right.
Second, you know, they're traded on the New York Stock Exchange.
Right.
Oakland County is not traded on the stock exchange. I think if it were, we would probably trade very high.
Right.
But you know, third, they say that they're not subject to the Freedom of Information Act because they're a private company.
Okay.
So where it's been convenient, they've pretended to be a government entity,
right.
and where it's convenient, they've pretended to be a private entity.
Okay.
And so the basis of our lawsuit was to say that if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, and flies like a duck, it's a duck.
Right.
And we were the first in the country to call them on this in federal court.
Okay.
And so we sued them for 6 years back of real estate transfer taxes that they didn't pay.
Okay.
6 years is the, you know, as far as we can go back on a contract action.
Right.
And going forward, that we're now going to insist on collecting it.
Right.
We got a victory in the United States federal court. That was a huge victory. You know, people on both sides of the aisle were raving about it. The Oakland Press did an editorial. And so, you know, as we've lost value and as we've given money, like the TARP funding to all these banks that have then taken it and done whatever with it,
right.
you know, this is one of the few times where we've had a real victory for the little guy. Right. And we have been able to have that victory not only for Oakland County taxpayers to what will probably be about $3 to $5 million, but I organized a class action of the other 81 counties in Michigan, excluding Macomb. They won a federal judgment at the same time, and now there are 25 jurisdictions throughout the country that are following suit and filing the same lawsuit as we did.
Okay.
And so it's a way that we're trying to provide some leadership nationally, that we're trying to make ourselves whole from the loss that we've you know, experienced. Right. And it's been you know, a pretty exciting thing. And like you said, we're not just laying back and seeing what happens. We're going after it and being aggressive and working to protect property values, fight foreclosure, and to secure our financial future. And that's what that lawsuit really represents, as well as making them pay.
Right. And these are even funds that can make sure that we may not have to lay off a sheriff's deputy or assistant prosecutor, too, if we're collecting on those.
Yeah, and that's a very important point, is that you know, that money, when it comes into the general fund, that will be used to you know, bolster the general fund and to help us provide some of the excellent services that we provide, whether it be public safety, health, transportation, any, you know, recreation. Parks and Rec is one of the beautiful things about Oakland County. So yeah, it's a win-win across the board, and Something that I've tried to do is to take this office that used to be a little bit sleepy kind of out of the shadows and into some of the relevant challenges that are facing Oakland County. And for us, it's protecting property values, fighting foreclosure, and also trying to create jobs.
Right. Now, with a $230 million surplus, you mentioned the TARP funding. Tell us a little bit about how you've shifted some of the investments from some of these big banks to local credit unions and how that benefits the community.
Sure. Well, while the big banks were going through so much trouble and, they had gotten caught with their hand in the cookie jar on all these mortgage-backed securities, and they stopped lending. In contrast, our community banks and our credit unions, they continued to lend. And they didn't take on a lot of the toxic assets that some of the other larger banks had taken on.
Right.
And so when I became county treasurer, I shifted gears. And we have now invested hundreds of millions of dollars, Oakland County taxpayer dollars,
right,
in Oakland County institutions, right, who turn around and make loans to small and medium-sized businesses so that we can be creating jobs, making loans to families so that they can send their kids to school, or buy a new vehicle so that they can get to work. And that is just a way of us to work smarter with the money that we've got and to get a better return on investment,
right,
which is what I think the taxpayers really deserve.
Right. Well, I appreciate that. When I'm at court for my full-time job, I have to walk by your area sometimes, and I notice that you're actually out helping steer the traffic and talking to folks in line, and I think that hands-on approach really helps. But for more information about what your office does, can you tell us the website and some more information about
Sure.
how people can reach you?
Well, as ever, people can contact us online at www.oakgov.com/treasurer. It's oakgov.com/treasurer. Mm-hmm. They can call us at 248-858-0624. And then, as ever, my cell phone is 421-ANDY. Mm-hmm. And I think that being accessible is very important, as is humble public service. And that's why you see me out there running coffee or water out to folks, because people need to understand that, they're our boss. Right. And so that's that's how we try to treat them and give them excellent customer service.
Right. Well, we appreciate the job you're doing. And I guess just to wrap up, if there's one thing you want someone to know about the county treasurer's office, what would that be?
I think the one thing is that for the money that's invested in this office, we bring one of the most significant returns on investment of any entity in the entire county. Whether it's our return on investment from investments in local banks and credit unions, or our administration of the tax foreclosure process. And when people walk away from their properties, refuse to enter into even a $25 payment plan, state law requires us to sell their properties instead of letting that tax burden shift onto others, okay, which I'm not going to let happen on my watch. We this year looks like are going to bring in $5 million for the county, okay, and that's $5 million that the taxpayers don't have to pay for. So I think for me it all comes down to return on investment, dollar for dollar.
I'm Tim Burns. You've been watching Oakland Connection, and we'll see you next time.